This weekend project starts with 3 crates, 2 large and 1 small. What I need to do first is prime the crates. That way the paint sticks better. This is a gray primer and I'm going to put it all over. I love to spray it on because I can get all the grooves with it. Once I get all that primer on, I'm going to turn to ruby red. That's going to be the color of all the crates. I did use 2 cans and I did have to put 2 coats on. As you can see, it's better just to put some even sprays on it and it gets in between all the grooves. Once that's painted and dry, it's time to glue some of these pieces together. Gluing and nailing is going to make it super strong. I use this scrap board, put it on, glued it first. I'm going to put it onto the bottom of one of the larger crates. Once I get that done, I'm going to mark out where the slats are on the next crate and glue those down. As you can see, I've got them separated. I'm going to stick this crate into the long end and put it together. Again, using small little brad nails to hold it while the glue dries. Then on the other side, I'm going to take that smaller crate, just using some tiny little pin nails to hold it, and it's going to be super strong. Then I'm going to grab some scrap pallet wood, cut these down to about 8 inches in length. Once I got that, I'm going to put them together, little scrap piece, and I'm going to take another little scrap piece, glue it, turn it around, and again using that small little pin nailer to hold it while the glue dries. Once I get all of these nailed up, I'm going to turn it around and take a little paper plate. And then I'm going to use that as my guide to make a nice circle. Then I'm going to turn to my bandsaw, slow but steady. I'm going to cut it out along that line. Once I get it cut out, I'm going to have some of these circles out of scrap wood, and I'm going to need 4 of them. And here they go on the side. As you can tell, they're going to be little wheels. I'm going to put those in with some longer brad nails. Once I do that, though, I'm going to take a little tiny dowel, paint it black, and put it in the middle. That's going to be my little hubcap. And then I need to cover up some of that rough edge. I'm going to make a fender. I'm going to use some of this stuff that I got from Dollar Tree. Using some hot glue, I'm going to put it in place and hold it down. It's ready to go in about 20 seconds. Then it's time to put the lights on the front with this nice stick and peel. And look at that. It lights up and it looks great. And what's a little red truck without its windshield? A little scrap chalkboard, put some hot glue down, and I'm going to stick that in place, and about 15-20 seconds later I can let it go. Also, I'm going to decorate this out for Christmas. Put that little bow on front and a wreath. And last but not least, what about a little sign that I made from a silhouette and some scrap wood? Put that on there. Let's take it inside and show it off. Here we are. I'm going to throw a little Christmas tree in the back because this is for delivery. I love this little red truck. It turned out so great and it looks amazing. I love all the decorations that you put on. And I got a little visitor here that thinks they can drive it around the house. I hope you love this little pallet red truck that we made, delivering Christmas trees to the neighborhood.
Grab a pallet and turn it into something you'll be excited to have on your front porch this winter. I cut the edges with a cordless chainsaw, used a hammer to remove each piece of wood from the center, and then I pulled all the nails. I placed 4 boards together and drew the outline of a snowman. I roughly divided the board into 4 sections and made the bottom a bit bigger, going smaller as I moved my way towards the top. I cut the design out with a jigsaw, being careful to always cut away from myself. I cut an extra piece for the hat and 2 extra pieces for supports on the back. I quickly sanded everything. I secured everything together with a brad nailer and wood glue. I made a whitewash with white exterior paint and water and brushed it onto the snow part of the snowman. I wiped the extra paint off with a clean rag and then repeated the same process for the hat using black acrylic paint watered down. I added the bottom piece of the hat and secured it with wood glue and a brad nailer from both the front and back sides. I set it aside to dry and cut 9 rounds from a wood dowel, sanded the edges, painted them with the same black. Once dry, I attached them using hot glue, and then I cut a triangle shape with some scrap wood, painted it orange using an acrylic paint marker and paintbrush with water. I cut a piece of felt for the scarf, and now I've got a pair of snowmen that will stay alive all season long.
This is no ordinary pallet project. What we're going to do, the first step, is we got to pull all these boards off. They're actually easier than it looks. All you got to do is give a little bit of pressure with a crowbar, and these nails pop right out. We want to pull out the big ones and the small boards. First step, though, after that, is to get 2 long 1x3 6-foot long boards. We're going to put these in an L pattern, but we need to put some glue down. That is perfect. It actually holds boards together better than nails. Once we get that glued down, we're going to put this in an L shape just like that, and then we're going to use a few nails to hold it in place. I use 1.5-inch nails. They're perfect and they go in just right. Once we get that all glued together, we're going to mark 12 inches from the bottom. That's going to be our starting place for our first board. Now I'm going to start with a wider board right here. We're going to set this across, and then we're going to alternate to a smaller board. Again, going after that to a wider board, from wide, small, alternating all the way up. Now, we're going to lay all these across, but these are not cut to the size we want. Once we get these laid out, what we want to do is mark at the base the 24 inches. That is going to be our first cut, but we're going to lay a straight board across at an angle from the 24 inches up to the top, and then we're going to mark it all the way across. What this does is this gives us a perfect angle to make our pallet Christmas tree. Once we get it marked out, we're going to put it over to 22.5 degrees, which happens to follow the marks all the way up. Once we cut these, we're going to cut that first one. Now remember, every cut we do, we need to make a duplicate because we're going to do two sides of the tree. Starting back at the bottom one again, we're going to use the brad nails and put it into place. Doesn't take much, just put them in there. Now we need to space it. I use my pencil as a spacer and it worked perfect. We don't want to just bunch them up right next to each other. Once we get the first row done, we need to flip it over to make it easy. Take that, it's really light because that pallet wood is not that heavy, and we're going to lay it across the table. Again, I'm going to use a clamp on this side just to hold it in place, and then we're going to line up the boards with the first set we put in. This goes much faster on the second row than the first row because the first row is what is like our template and holds it in place. Once we get these all brad nailed down, just like we did with the first ones, we are going to take a drill bit and randomly just put drill bits and holes all across the pallet tree. Once we get these random holes just put all inside there, we're going to grab us some white or colored lights. It's a preference. Make sure you get the ones that can plug in from the back though, just in case you run out of room. Take those lights and you're going to staple them down. Now be careful with the staples. You want to make sure that you don't go through the wires. Now remember those holes that we drilled? Stick the light right through there. And again, use the staples to hold them in place. We're going to go up and around and all around our pallet Christmas tree. Now we're going to put it in place on that boring corner in the house, and look at this. We're going to light it up and watch just that magic come alive. Wasn't it great to be able to upcycle some pallets and make it into a Christmas tree and turn that boring corner into a work of art?
I grabbed a pallet for this super easy holiday decor. I removed some of the boards using a hammer, making sure to keep the boards intact. I hammered them back onto the front of the pallet so they were closer together. If you find a pallet with the boards close together, I'd recommend just grabbing that one. I used my battery chainsaw to trim the extra boards on the end, and I used painter tape to mark out a line about 1/3 of the way down the pallet, leaving one vertical board untaped. I mixed acrylic paint with water and painted between the lines. I added a bit too much water, so I ended up just adding the paint directly to my brush to make the color less transparent. While wet, I removed the tape, and once everything was dry, I used hot glue to apply a giant bow. I made a second one, and now I have 2 giant presents for my front porch decor this holiday season. What do you think? Is this a project you'd try? I hope it inspires you to get creative with pallets this holiday season. Grab a sheet of plywood. First, I made a DIY projector from a cardboard box. Using a cell phone light, I projected the image and traced the shape of the tree, and then used a jigsaw to cut out all the details. To make a star, I drilled a hole with 1.5 or 1.25 inch drill bit. I cut the points of the star out using the jigsaw. I swept it, wiped it clean, and painted it with exterior white latex paint. I cut a scrap 2x4 into a point at the end and then screwed it down the center of the tree with 1 to 2 feet sticking out the bottom. Then I used a staple gun to attach white outdoor string lights to the back of the tree. And now you've got the best outdoor seasonal decor on your block. Bonus, it looks great during the day and the night.
Ever wondered what you can do with those wood slices from the craft store, or any wood slices someone might make for you with a chainsaw and a spare piece of wood? First thing you're going to do is grab wood slices of varying sizes. I happen to have some of these wooden stakes, so I am going to use this drilled into the back of my wood slices to hold them. I decided, because mine were pretty hefty, to just take a triangular piece of wood to use as a support in the back, and I also just attached that. I was going to leave these wood slices natural, but I didn't really love the look, so I got a can of satin indoor-outdoor spray paint in white, and I decided to paint just the front faces, leaving a bit of the live edge around the outside. Once I did this, I just got some craft paint, and I'm brushing on the face, including the eyes, the mouth, the nose, and the buttons. Next, I went to go ahead and arrange them once the paint was dry, and I also cut some scrap material that I had to use as scarves. And there you have it. With a few Christmas lights in the back, you have some really lovely porch decor that can last you really beyond Christmas and all through the winter season.
The first thing I did was paint the bottom of each crate with the color green. I let that dry completely before moving on to the next step. Next, I placed some blue painter's tape in a triangle shape on one of the crates and in the corners of the other two crates. Once the painter's tape was in place, I used chalk paint in the color white to paint the corners so that it would define the Christmas tree even more. Once all of the paint had dried completely, I hot glued LED lights into place. I had one strand per crate so that I could easily put them together and pull them apart for storage. Once the LED lights were in place, I hot glued some Christmas bulbs into place to help create the beautiful Christmas tree. Once everything was done, I stacked all of the crates in this shape to create that Christmas tree look. I added some optional Christmas presents to the bottom of the tree.
I had an idea for a cute snowman project, so I headed over to my local lumber store and picked out some wood spindles. Then I had my husband cut them out for me. Next, give them a good thick coat of white paint on all sides. Now it is time to give them character and dress them. Before we clothe them, we will put their faces on. I freehanded their faces, but if you need some inspiration, search up snowman face on the internet and you will find all sorts of cute expressions. My snow family consists of a dad, mom, brother, and little sister. I chose to give each a different expression and one that was fitting for their personality. When all of their faces were done, it was time to dress them. For the father, I created a long toque by cutting a piece of cotton fabric that reached around the top of the snowman head. Start gluing at the front by gluing the middle of the fabric to the front of the snowman head. Then glue the seam of the toque all the way to the end. Next, glue on a piece of jute ribbon as trim for the toque. You may need to double up the ribbon so that the fabric won't show through, as I had to. Next, bend over the end of the toque, tie it with twine, and snip off the excess twine. Next, glue on brown jingle bells as buttons. Lastly, cut a strip of the same fabric and make it into a scarf for the father. Tack it in places with the hot glue so that it lays nicely. For the mum, I created her hat out of a 2-inch wide piece of jute ribbon. First, cut a piece long enough for her hat. Next, fold the end of the ribbon and glue it to the back of her head. Then trim the toque with a decorative piece of ribbon and glue it all the way around with the seam at the back. Then tie the top with a piece of twine and trim the excess. I cut long strips at the end of the toque. Next, cut a piece of ribbon long enough to make a scarf and glued on a couple of rusty jingle bells as buttons. Follow the same instructions for the little boy and girl snowmen. Now it's time to enjoy. Set them up in a little wintry spot in a place where everyone can see them and admire them.